Hello and welcome to the Getting There Show, where we speak with brilliant people and unpack the key influences and decisions that have helped them get to where they are today. You'll get the books, the mental models, the inspirations, and all the steps in their journey to help guide you on your own path. As Isaac Newton said, "If I have seen further, it is by standing on the shoulders of giants." Today's giant is a very interesting guy called Benji Portwin, who after receiving his degree in engineering from Oxford, became a maths teacher, then worked in sales, then became an agile coach for the government, before landing product management roles at Spotify and Monzo Bank, and who now leads product at an amazingly successful health tech scale-up in London that powers over 90% of GP surgeries in the UK. We cover so much ground here, like how Benji got into product, why product is all about people, why he sometimes feels like a janitor, why personality tests are useful and it's not what you think, and crucially, some of his tattoos which are product related. As always, we make sure to include all of Benji's toolkit and influences in the show notes so as to maximize the chances that this show helps you get to where you want to get to. So, Benji, welcome. How are you doing?
Good, thanks. Thanks for having me.
No worries. And whereabouts are you at the moment?
I'm currently in just by Tower Bridge on the south side, just off Tooley Street.
Okay, so London.
Very much in London, yeah.
And how's lockdown been for you? Have you been working from home?
I get to go to the office 2 days a week, which is really great. So it's not been as bad as previously, but definitely I don't love working from home, it's fair to say.
And because you work in health, right, you're classified as a key worker.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So we're allowed to go in, but we are trying to do social distancing as much as we can. So we have teams alternating which days they go in so we can space out around the office. We do have a team at the moment that's in full time because they're working on a vaccine delivery product for COVID.
Oh, wow. Well, I look forward to digging into the vaccine product in a minute. But yeah, one of the ways that we like to kick off the Getting There show is to ask our guests to sort of summarize their journey so far. So it'd be great if you could provide a sort of potted history of your career path, sort of starting with university right up to where you are today.
Yeah, absolutely. So I ended up doing engineering at university. I wouldn't say it was probably the best choice for me, but in this country at the age of, 15, 16, you pick your A-levels, and that pretty much determines your university degree. So I did double maths and physics, as they called it back then, for A-level. That pretty much meant I could do maths, physics, or engineering. And I went for engineering because I prefer more applied maths. But to be honest, I wouldn't say I loved it. I more sort of tolerated it because even though I love building things and learning how things work, I don't love maths for the sake of maths, which then makes it a bit weirder when after university I left and became a maths teacher. They say you do both jobs your parents do, and so I did both of those. I started as a teacher, which my mum was, and I taught maths for 2 years, a year as a PGC student and a year full-time teacher. Loved teaching, loved interacting with children and teaching them maths and other things, life skills, but wouldn't say I love schools. They aren't a very conducive environment, I would say. And their stats are sadly true that half of all NQTs, new teachers, all leave within the first 2 years, and I was one of those. And I swung all the way across to full hard sales, as I call it, which is all the things you see in a movie. If you ever watch Boiler Room, whiteboards on the wall with people's names on it with promotion and relegation. Relegation means you got fired. Power hours where you stand up and you can't sit down. Sambuca breakfasts, all the things which you've heard about, they do exist. And selling what they call air pie, which is like cold calling and selling a vision. And then I knew I didn't want to do that anymore after about 9 months because it kind of changes you as a person quite a lot using these sales techniques. And I was starting using my personal life and I decided I didn't want to do it anymore. And so I moved into easier sales, but hard physical goods sales for Diageo, who sell alcohol. They had a lot of the alcohol in the world. So I went and sold vodka and whiskey and things, which was really fun. I was still pretty fresh out of university, got company car and got a lot of big parties. After about 6 months of doing that, though, I realised that it was a pretty fast track to an early death working for Diageo, to be perfectly honest, because there's a lot of drinking involved and I don't need an excuse to go for a beer. So that wasn't conducive for my long-term health. And at that point, I had a choice, really. It was either go back into teaching, which I was missing dearly, and I miss to this day, to be perfectly honest, or do something different. And I'd happened to apply for a thing called the Civil Service Fast Track. They ran a thing called Technology and Business Fast Track at that point, later became Digital Technology Fast Stream. And that took 9 months. So I wasn't really that bothered by it, to be perfectly honest, which sounds really bad, but it took so long that I never really got interested in the first place. And I think my lethargy towards the situation made me more appealing compared to the average person applying. I also had a bit more life experience than most. A lot of people go into it as grads. I had a few years of experience in work, so I think I just came across a bit different. Anyway, I got offered that place, and I didn't know what to do, actually. So very immaturely, or maybe not, depending how you look at it, I went to the pub with some friends and had a few drinks and tossed a coin. The coin landed on, I don't know which way around it was, let's call it head for the moment. And I went to the Civil Service Fast Track route. And I was even luckier then, because I actually got sequestered for a job in the Foreign Office, which took a while to get security clearance done. And while waiting for that to happen, I got moved into a place called GDS, the Government Digital Service, which had only sort of spun up about 1.5 years earlier, and was this centre of excellence for technology and digital products within government. They were the ones who built Register to Vote. They built the carers allowance scheme. They built the new passport renewal service. There were a lot of these services they were building, as well as just trying to hold the government to account for their IT spend and in general improve the system. Basically, a transformation office. And I got put in there, and was day one was pretty much besotted with the place. I walked in and I was suit and tie, which obviously wasn't the right dress code. Everyone else was in jeans and t-shirts or flip-flops and shorts. People were sitting around looking very relaxed, laughing. The walls were full of posters and post-it notes. Everyone had an hour for lunch. It was a very, very different working environment I'd ever seen before. I'd only been in sales or schools. And I pretty immediately was like, okay, these are my people. I'm going to stay here. And I started on the technology side, and I was learning all about like proper technology stacks and how Capgemini and Atos and those kind of companies take the government to the cleaners. But I quickly wanted to move around and learn about what other roles were. And I got I got asked politely to go into a digital team, so a product team as I now know it, that was building a variety of different products across government, and loved it. I got close to these product teams and started seeing them actually build things, learned about the government's process for that with sort of discovery process and then building an alpha or an MVP and testing it. And I'd never seen any of these things before. I never even dreamt of working in tech, to be perfectly honest. I've always been an enthusiast, but I never thought I had those skills. I've never been that interested in writing code. So for me, I was like, well, if you don't write code, you can't possibly work in technology. And then in these teams, I suddenly realized there were other roles. There were researchers, there were designers, there were product managers, there were delivery managers. I was like, oh, okay, well, I haven't got to write code. And then I kind of looked at the different roles they had and sort of said, well, how can I sort of make myself permanent in one of these kind of roles? And I wasn't very good at drawing, so I rolled out design. I wasn't particularly good at asking questions, and I took a long time in my life to get good at listening even, so I wasn't going to be a researcher. I didn't really know what a product manager was, to be perfectly honest, but the delivery manager role was basically, from what I could work out, half teaching and half sales, and a lot of getting stuff done. And so I spent a load of time learning more about that role, and then realized that was probably the thing that I could do quite well. I'd run an awful lot of sports teams, which actually are very analogous to running a product team. I've learned since then. And I went away and took a qualification, actually, because a qualification for me doesn't necessarily mean that you can do the thing that much better, but it does force you to go away and do learning. The one I did had a 3-hour written exam. So I had to go away and read a lot of books for the syllabus and take this exam. And the actual piece of paper at the end of getting it wasn't worth that much. I'm proud I've got it, but I wouldn't look into it in that respect. but it forced me to go away and really learn what Kanban was, learn what Scrum was, learn what delivering early and often meant, learn what all these buzzwords and phrases I didn't really know about in real detail. And then actually, within government on the fast stream, you're meant to go for 4 years, and pretty much a year and a half in, it sounds overconfident maybe now, but I was kind of ready to move on and be a permanent civil servant and sort of take on a more leadership role. And was sort of told I had to wait my turn. I'm a pretty impatient person. And so actually the company that delivered the training for the qualification were hiring agile consultants who go and work with other companies and try and upskill them in these areas. And so I reached out to them and they offered me a job and I went into that. And so consultancy firms the world over will throw inexperienced, not super old people into very challenging situations to see if you can sink or swim, which is not really fair, but that's the way they do it. And for me, actually, it was great. I got to go and pair up with a load of industry experts. These are kind of people now whose day rates are kind of £10,000 a day, running courses across the whole of the world. And I, at that point, got to go and sit and watch them for a month and then just take over. And I think one of my probable skills I have in life, I can watch someone do something and do it 70% as well as them, like not like a real skill, but as in like a copycat of them. So I learned to facilitate these sessions and run through this syllabus like they were, and learned to run these public courses. We were coming in and learning about Agile, basically. And they got to go on to projects with these consultants and just kind of learn really quickly from them. And that was an amazing education into what Agile was all about. And it wasn't what most people think it is. To this day, I get trigger points when I read CVs and they talk about the Agile methodology, because that's not what it is. That was great. So I sort of did this transformation role, went round with it. And then from there, I did a year there. And then after a while, I kind of outgrew that consultancy firm. I wanted the next thing, and there wasn't really a next thing there for me. And so I actually decided to go back into government. I wasn't particularly keen on being a civil servant again. I'd gone through that and found there's quite a sandbox of what you can and can't do as a civil servant. There's quite a fear attached to it and quite a hierarchy, to be perfectly honest, where everyone knows each other's grade and people won't reply to your email unless you're the right grade. It's a very weird society over there. But then I realized I could maybe freelance in, which I'd seen happen before. You get paid more money, and the downside is you haven't got job security, but I've never really cared about that, to be honest. So I freelanced in to the NHS. I knew someone from previous time at government who was doing a team there, and they were basically doing nhs.uk, which is a copy of gov.uk for healthcare. Pardon me. And it was really wonderful, actually. It was really one of the best I'd ever worked. Probably the best team I've ever been part of. It was a 16-person team. I was delivery manager for that team, and sort of then also learned agile coaching skills as being part of that. Did that for nearly a year. Really loved it, but my wife actually moved to New York. She's American, and she wanted to go and live in New York for a while. And so she moved out there before I did. And after a while, it was very clear I needed to go and move to New York to make my marriage work. And so she actually sent me an advert for Spotify for agile coach role they had going on there. And I'd always watched the videos of Spotify and heard about the kind of the myth of the place, but never really thought I was good enough, to be perfectly honest. Bit of imposter syndrome around it. And she was like, well, you should apply. Like, what's the worst that can happen? It's in New York. And I did. And yeah, long story short, I got the job. A lot of luck and also a lot of really wonderful interviewers, to be perfectly honest. And then, yeah, had a wonderful year as an agile coach at Spotify. I actually got offered 2 jobs in New York. One was to be the head of kind of agile delivery for a company called Us2. The other one was to be agile coach at Spotify. And I'm nearly picked the head of roles. I was like, that sounds glamorous, and I can run my own department, and I want responsibility. And I'm so glad I didn't, because I went to Spotify and I learned that I didn't know very much. And they had the world's best agile coaches there, people who were just so amazing at it that to be near them was a privilege. I'd have paid money to just work near them, to be perfectly honest. And I then learned what the role was really all about. And I learned what coaching was. And I had to learn it the hard way and get it wrong and have very formal lessons around it to be really good at it. And then, yeah, when I was there, the opportunity to be a product manager. And I wasn't actually, if I'm perfectly honest, dying to move into product management. It wasn't something I really was that keen to do. But the role of agile coach at Spotify was changing. I was moving away from being what I consider to be an agile coach and being more into kind of a scrum mastery role. I'd kind of done that already, and I'd moved away from that. And I'd also coached an awful lot of people to become product managers in my time there. And this team had a really tough delivery target they had to hit because of GDPR and other things, actually. I said, look, for the moment, I'll just run this team like for 3 months, hit this goal, and then after that, we'll hire someone in and they can take over. And 6 weeks in, a couple of members of the team just came to me and said, we really like having you as our product manager. Would you be interested in like doing this full time? And then, I sort of thought about it. I was like, well, actually, I am enjoying this. Some part of it's just any new challenge is really enjoying. And then, I sort of talked to people who ran the apartment, said, are you happy with how I'm doing? They were like, yes. Set some really clear like OKRs to sort of officially move me from A to B. If I hit these things, then we can move across. Did that and then stayed there and took over this team for just over a year and a bit at Spotify. And then I need to leave New York. My wife changed jobs, was in Oslo, and New York to Oslo was really a struggle, to be perfectly honest. The time zone was very, very hard to have a marriage over that distance. And so I didn't want to live in Oslo. It's too small for me. And so I actually then moved across to London because obviously I'm from here. At least then it was easy to fly back and forward. The time zones were easy. And it was a much closer place to be near my wife. I could stay with Spotify, but the London office of Spotify isn't quite as exciting, to be perfectly honest, as the New York one. New York's got 1,500 people, so Stockholm, London, at the time was quite small, it was 100 people. So the work they were doing was more ancillary work. They weren't really owning much. That has changed a bit recently. They're owning a bit more. It's like 300 plus now, I think, in London. But Monzo was a company that was hiring, and I'd always been a fan. I was one of the early adopters, and I loved the mission, loved some of the blogs they produced around transparency. And a bit like Spotify, I wanted to go and see what the myth was like. And so I went there, and I had a really, really great, probably first 6-7 months there. And then the 7-8 months after that weren't quite as fun. And I started to look for something new. I did a really short stint at the start of this year with a company called Hawkfish in New York, who are a digital agency, a bit similar to Cambridge Analytica, to be perfectly honest, but for the left wing. And their job was solely trying to get rid of Trump. That was all their mission was for the entire year. And they had funding from Bloomberg to do that. So I was going to be involved in the Democratic campaign, which was really fun. I was only doing I wasn't really being that useful to be perfectly honest. I can't claim any credit of any kind, but they did some really great work. I was there for 3-ish months, and then because of COVID, it sort of didn't become feasible anymore, to be perfectly honest. And then, really, really luckily, AccuRx is a company that I talked to while I was at Monzo. I know someone who worked there from my time in AHS, and just been kept in touch, to be perfectly honest. And when I knew I was leaving Hawkfish and I was going to get a new role, I don't normally mess around for too long. I normally put some apps out, see who looks interesting, and then kind of take a gamble on that normally. I just reached out to them and said, hey, would you have a role for me? And, long story short, we worked something out, which I'm really, really glad I have, because it's such an amazing company. I'm really lucky to be involved in their journey now. It's quite a verbose answer, I realise, but
no, it's awesome. And it'll be good while we're here to just talk a bit more about what the business that you work at does, because I certainly know that it's growing like crazy and has real market penetration in the UK.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, I can't really claim credit for anything that they've done so far. I've only been there for just 6 months. They've been going for over 4 years. What they've done in healthcare in this country is truly amazing. They worked out after doing a 3-month, basically like research stint in a GP surgery. The team, I think it was 5 or 6 of them at the time. They sat in a GP surgery and saw every role, sat next to them, took notes for 3 months. They went in thinking they were going to do something around prescriptions and how they could improve those. What they really found out was 2 things. One, healthcare is a communication industry. That's actually what modern healthcare is. It's communication. You go to doctors to get diagnosed, to speak to them. It's how well they can communicate with you that really determines your level of care. And sadly, in this country, in the NHS, that is actually really tough to do. Not through the fault of any of the wonderful people working in the industry, but if you've ever seen some of the technology they're using, most of the people are communicating via letters, whether that's with you as the patient or between a hospital and GP surgery. It's very, very slow. A lot of time is spent doing these kind of administrative tasks on pretty bad IT. So that was the first thing they realized, that like communication was the key to all of healthcare. Second thing they realized was, well, what's the communication method that cuts through all of the noise? If the number one user need is for a doctor to speak to a patient easily, that's sending them a letter, what's the thing they can do? And the answer is an SMS, because the SMS is everyone reads. They think it's their mum. So not everyone's on WhatsApp, not everyone's on iMessage, or not everyone's on whatever, Telegram or any other instant messaging app, or on Snapchat or whatever else, but everyone gets SMSs and everyone reads SMSs because you think it's important. And so if your doctor uses them, then they'll get through to that patient and they know they'll be read, basically. And so they built a really simple tool that allowed a doctor to just quickly, whilst you're in the room chatting to them, SMS you. And the ability, the use cases for that, the doctors using these for, and GPs using these for, is just endless already. Even during COVID, when people were coming in, they said, go and wait in your car rather than standing in a queue outside, because they're social distancing, and we'll text you to let you know when we're coming in, which of course is not one of the use cases that was originally designed for it.
Yeah.
It's a very versatile tool. And we've gone from there just trying to join up all the parts of healthcare, to join up all the different people involved in your care with you. And in the long, long run, it should be as easy as a WhatsApp group, to have a chat with a doctor, to talk to a physiotherapist, to check in with your care, to check your vitals. Like, we're not that many years away from that. So it's really, really exciting to be involved in.
Great. And at the start, Benji, you mentioned that there was a sort of COVID vaccine sort of delivery project. Just spend like a minute on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So we started out on Friday last week, after the announcements and after quickly things went into gear. And like anything in this space, no one really knows how we're going to do it. That's the honest truth. Like, everyone's working out, and we will do it as fast as possible, as well as possible. But most people, I would guess, most healthcare professionals, I say guess, I kind of know some insight in this area, are looking at, well, how are we going to do it? Well, we'll just use a spreadsheet. We'll just use a bit of paper, like whatever we need, basically, to get people vaccinated. That's the most important thing. We'll kind of solve the admin afterwards. But actually, of course, that just leads to a massive operational debt that slows down vaccinations. I'm not talking about like one or two people here. I'm talking about 60 million people getting 2 vaccinations, right? This is going to be a huge operation and will take potentially a year or more. And so and I'm sure other companies are really keen to help. And so we literally just started building a product that hopefully will allow people to nationally book slots. And for the people who are operating the delivery centres, it will probably be a GP surgery in each area, to send out SMSs saying when you're coming in, to send reminder messages, and then on the day to check you in for which arm you've been vaccinated in, and to say you've had your first one and remind you of your second one, and to make sure everyone has those too, and that's saved in your medical record, so you then don't get confused and go again, or no one else tries to SMS you again and say, hey, you haven't had it, or whatever else. And this might be a thing we need to do every year, potentially. We're not sure whether or not vaccination will last longer than a year. So it's something a product that hopefully, once we've built it, can be used and used again.
That's really cool.
We've got 3 weeks to finish it, so we'll see where we get to.
So, yeah, thanks so much for taking us through your career path to date. And it's clear that although you didn't sort of start with kind of product in mind, the experiences that you've had seem to have made you a really strong, compelling sort of product leader. So with that in mind, it would be really good to talk a bit about tips that you have for getting into the industry. So a lot of our listeners are really keen to sort of transition into product. So I'd love to spend a bit of time picking your brain on what that advice would look like.
Yeah, definitely. There's a couple of things that people ask about this I normally talk about. One is make sure you really want the job, because product management, I think, sounds a lot more glamorous than it is a lot of the time. I think it's one of the hardest jobs you could possibly do, because you don't get much credit, basically. When things go really well, you stand at the back and push your team forward and say, oh, the team's awesome, put this amazing thing. And when things go wrong, you stand at the front and get the bullet. You get blamed for the situation. And that's why product communities are so important, for this sort of looking after other, basically, in these states. But one, be sure you want to do it. You're not the mini CEO. That's a terrible phrase. I know ever threw that around the first time. You're more like the janitor. And someone wrote a great blog post on that. You type in product manager like being a janitor. There's a really good blog post on that. It is a lot of polyfilling in gaps in teams and making sure everyone else is happy. And in general, like servant leadership is putting everyone else's needs above your own. So one, like check you really want to do that, because it's not the role that's probably advertised on job boards at times. Then after that, it's really, really hard if you haven't got any experience. Like any role, it's hard, but this role probably more than most. If you do a computer science degree, or even if you go and do a 3-month boot camp as an engineer in engineering, a lot of places will give you a junior dev role and give you a shot because they can pair you with somebody else. And in general, they can sort of test whether you're a self-learner, and they can like help you on that journey and give you slightly easier work basically to start off with. As a product manager, most people have a team of people. They need a product manager for it. They need it today. They need you to come in and make it work. And a lot of the time, they don't even know themselves what that means. They don't even know necessarily what a product manager is. People who are hiring them often haven't ever been that role themselves even. It's such a new role in the industry. So if you haven't got experience, they can't possibly hire you, because they need to come in and explain to them what the role is as well and rewrite the job description you've been hired for. The bigger places, your Facebooks, your Googles, do have APM programs, associate product manager programs. They're quite hard to get onto, but definitely doable. And there you get an 18-month program. They rotate you every 3 to 6 months. You have 3 different roles where you go into a team and you're a bit of a dog's body, to be perfectly honest. You get to learn from different product managers. You give them responsibility, but a lot of the time you're kind of doing the parts of product management that the product manager doesn't want to do. A lot more of the janitor stuff, basically. But you kind of suck it up because you want the role and you're learning all the time. So it's just the way it is. It's often the way in any entry-level role. Other than that, I often recommend, like, if you've already got a job skill, a lot of people come to product management already doing something else. There aren't that many people actually I speak to who are straight grads. A lot of them actually have got work experience elsewhere that they don't mind they're doing. They just want to change in the long run. I would advise trying to get into a product-led company in the role you're currently doing. Right? So if you work in sales or you work in marketing or whatever, look for a company that's product-led, like AccuRx is an example of a good, great product. Like, you know, a product-led company because they do great products, and try and apply for a role there. And some places you can be open about it, other places you've got to basically concede it a little bit that you might want to move on in the long run. Like Spotify, for example, openly the CEO said, if you're still doing the same job 2 years after we hire you, something's gone wrong. AccuRx is the same. Like, we have great internal mobility. The better companies do, but not everyone's quite as open about that. But try and come in as the role you're doing, smash it, be amazing at it, and 6 months to a year in, be like, I think I can really do this. I'm doing probably well. You think I'm great. I'd love to try and move across into product. Can you help me? And most places will have vacancies in product. So they will be keen to do that, because if you're a smart person, you've shown you're awesome. And most importantly, they can trust you, which is the biggest risk in hiring a product manager. Because you're the leader of the team, trust is everything, right? And so what you're really trying to hire for is trust. And if you've already shown you can do trust in a different role, moving you across into product with some mentoring and coaching is nowhere near as hard as hiring someone from scratch. So that would normally be my advice.
Yeah, that's really, really good advice. I mean, one of the other things that I've noticed about you, Benji, is that you also have an opinion. So you sort of created a view on, you know, what agile teams should look like, what remote teams should look like. So it's like you've created a sort of personal brand in the sort of product management space. Would you say that's fair?
I think that everyone has a personal brand. Something else I talked about a lot, actually more at Spotify than anywhere else, was I think every time you do anything, especially at work or outside of work, it is part of your brand. Every time you speak in a meeting, every time you do a presentation, I talk a lot with product managers in my company that don't do something half-hearted. If you give a presentation and you don't think it's any good, don't do it. Like, delay it, because that will affect your personal brand. People's perception of you often matters more than the reality, because they don't get to see the reality. Unless they're in your team working with you, always see these little glimpses of you. Same in a meeting, like, don't just speak for the sake of it. That's not impressive, right? Really, you're better off saying nothing unless something really important to say, or just like you've got something different to say. So yeah, I definitely believe everyone has a brand. That is really important. I wouldn't say that the blogs I write or the things I kind of post are necessarily an attempt to try and change my own personal brand, to be perfectly honest. They're mostly an evolving opinion. I learn something, like I think you mentioned about remote teams. So I'd always been very anti-remote teams. And I worked on a remote team that was based in America because that's where the product was being launched. It was Monzo US. And didn't have a choice, right? It wasn't an option to all put us in the same place because some of the team in the UK and some team in the US. Therefore, we basically had to be fully remote. And I had to learn how to make that work. I still don't think the remote team will ever be as strong as a co-located team, but I actually learned how you can make it pretty good. And therefore, I just wanted to share, like, hey, this is something I learned. Doesn't necessarily mean it would work the same way in other places, but this is something I had. And that's true with almost all the blogs I've ever written. It's just like, here's something I found out, I wanted to share. And if you find that useful, that's really awesome. And if not, also no worries as well. Like it's an opinion that changes.
But the fact that you are sort of thoughtful and I guess, blogging about your journey, I guess would be picked up by, future employers and will demonstrate that, you are thinking about your role and, how you can improve it. One of the other things I liked about your posts was that you wrote a document just before you started your new role entitled "Things About Me That Are Not Ideal," including the fact that you're dyslexic, the fact that you suck in the mornings, the fact that you often work later on in the evenings, you may get a Slack late, but don't feel the need to reply, the fact that you have a very expressive face. Why did you do that?
So it's funny, actually. It took me years to have the confidence to post that. When I was at Spotify, it went around like wildfire. Someone did one that's called "Hi, I'm Bob." I think they were going to work at a part of Google, maybe, and they made a presentation deck about themselves, which they shared in advance of going to the company with their team. And it was really honest, and it was really like, these are the things I'm good at, the things I'm not good at. And I was really impressed by it. Like, I was so impressed. I thought, when I next go to a new job, I'm going to do this. And when I went to Monzo, I didn't do it. I made the deck, I didn't share it. And I thought, I'll get there on day one and then I'll share it. And if I'm honest, I'm glad I didn't. It wasn't that kind of place, to be perfectly honest. And so I thought, okay, don't worry. And I shelved the idea. And then I landed at AccuRx and I got thrown really quickly into some work, like on day 2. And I didn't really have time to meet a lot of people I was working quite closely with and like do the introduction I would normally do before working closely. And I kind of just resurfaced the idea and was like, wow, they're going to get all of me really quickly. So I'm going to have to go full into kind of work mode. And I've got a load of things about me that either I'm trying to change or I simply can't. Like the expressive face one's a really good example. I think my first 3 or maybe even 4 jobs I had that came out constantly in feedback. Like, you've got a really expressive face, you should learn to not have one. And it really troubled me. And I really, really tried. And then it took me once I was at Spotify, actually, which is a place which really allowed you to be yourself. And I realized that actually it was a superpower in some ways. I hate that phrase, superpowers. It's not, I can't walk through walls. But like, it was actually quite useful because I could be in a meeting, I wouldn't need to say anything. And people would say, oh, Benji, I think you disagree. Your face suggests you disagree. And I didn't actually always disagree. I was just like thinking, my thinking face. But it actually gave me a nice opportunity to be able to speak without having to like jump in. And so after a while, I was like, oh, this is just my face. Now maybe I'll just like let people know. And so actually was really useful. And then the thing I haven't realized as well, I say, is it's not always what people think it is. So what I was trying to sort of get across at AccuRx with that point, for example, was don't assume my face is saying what you think it is, which is a good life lesson in general. Don't assume anything of anyone. And yeah, some of them I am working on, and other ones it's just me. Like I'm never going to be better in the mornings. Like that's just not my circadian rhythm. And I also hoped by publishing it that others would do the same. And some have, to be honest. And some people really liked it. Some people thought it was strange. Some people thought it was very weird. And sharing it publicly was kind of like, I've written a few things in my life for internal use and then gone, well, what's the harm? Like, what's the risk in just sharing this widely? And again, it wasn't like, oh, I'm awesome, I've done this doc. It was just I did this thing and I thought I'd just throw it out because it cost me nothing. If anyone found it interesting, great, basically.
Well, it reminds me of the Shopify CEO, Toby Lutker, and he does a similar thing in that he essentially, I think, creates a document every year so that people know how he likes to work and sort of what he expects, and the sort of the good, the bad, and the ugly. But he also profiles, or gets everyone in Shopify profiled using the Enneagram personality profile, which I don't know if you know much about it, but it's really interesting. It kind of scores you. It's a bit like Myers-Briggs, but a bit more sort of holistic, and scores you. I think there are 9 different Enneagrams, and it shows the business who's going to work well with who, and they pin all of the Enneagrams up of the business. So it's a sort of internal mapping tool. I think that's a really interesting way of thinking about the business, the sort of human capital, and how to optimize it.
Yeah, I mean, I've done a few of those different tests. Obviously, I've done Myers-Briggs a few times in my life and actually found it changes a lot with how I change, which is quite interesting. I generally find those most interesting for how you change as a human. So doing them consistently, the same test over the course of different years. And yeah, of course, there's some variance on just how you're feeling that day. But over time, you can get quite big changes based upon the job you're doing and like the partner you have and the life you're living, basically. My Myers-Briggs changed entirely apart from the E at the front based on being an agile coach. I moved from being someone who was a very stand at the front leader to a very much more passive servant leader standing at the back of the room. And that I found just interesting for my own reflection. Like it was almost like a nice moment where I was like, oh, I have changed. This work to myself can be like measured. And the ones you do in work, like the one you're describing, I've done a few similar ones that I think they really do as a team. It's a really good team activity to do, to learn about each other. I think that's the power of them, to be honest. I wouldn't go as far as using them to sort of decide who goes in which team. I know McKinsey were famous for that with Myers-Briggs. They always had one of each of the 4 in their pods. That feels a bit too formulaic for me, but if it works for them, great.
So let's move on now, Benji, to talk a bit about some of the influences on your career journey. And I always like to ask about books. So is there a particular book that you think has had a profound impact on the way that you think and the way that you operate?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's been a lot of books. Now, I'm not really like a very good reader. It doesn't come naturally to me at all. Actually, between the ages of, 17 and 27, I didn't read a single book. Like I flicked through stuff at university to pass exams, but I never actually read any book. And then I think I don't know what happened. Maybe my iPod broke on the way to a holiday. And I was like, right, well, I'm screwed here. I haven't got anything to do when I'm on the beach. And I was like, well, let's try and pick the number 1 bestseller. And it was Thinking Fast and Slow, which is obviously not a great book to restart your reading career on because it's quite a dense read. And I must have read it 2 or 3 times to really understand it. It took me a long, long time. But I'm really sad. I measure books now. I wasn't quite as coveted, but basically how many pages you've got to turn to have an aha moment. And that book is not very many. And suddenly this whole field of behavioral psychology opened up to me that I never even knew existed in behavioral economics. And from Thinking Fast and Slow, I went on to Predictably Irrational.
Dan Ariely. Yeah.
And then all those other books in that field, and kind of went through all of the mainstream ones, things like Switch and all of these kind of stuff with the Heath brothers. And that just completely blew my mind. It was suddenly like, oh, I now understand more about myself. I understand why teams work the way they do. I understand why people do things they do. I'd always be able to sort of get by and being okay at it. I didn't know why it worked. Now to have the science behind what I was doing and seeing why it worked was absolutely fascinating. And so that changed my life in many, many ways, but mostly because it made me want to read and it made me suddenly want to learn. And suddenly I was getting into agile coaching at the time, and it suddenly was so applicable to the job I was doing. And it made me so much better at my job. And this sounds so obvious now in hindsight, but to say, read the book and then go to work the next day and be better at job was such a fantastic formula that just suddenly started spinning that flywheel round. And I started progressing at work so much quicker and reading more, and everything went from there. So that's probably the one that probably changed my life the most.
And it sounds like it's changed the way that you kind of view teams, but I imagine it also has an impact on how you think about products too. because the whole field of behavioral economics is looking at how we as humans make decisions, and if you can embed those kind of cognitive biases into product design, you're going to get users to do what you want them to do.
Yeah, 100%. And I kind of, when people come to me to ask about going to product again, I say, do you like people? And they're always like, what do you mean? I'm like, you need to really like people. Because one, you need to build a team, which is people skills. And two, you need to go understand your users, which again is people skills. They're actually very similar skills applied in different ways. But you need to be that person who's at a house party, number one. And then two, at a house party then says, hey, do you use my product? Or like, do you do this thing? And like make that interesting and not feel like user research. And if you don't enjoy doing that stuff, then it's going to be a real slog to enjoy product management, basically. Whereas, yeah, if you love it and you enjoy building teams and making people feel trusted, all those kind of stuff, then it won't be too hard.
And what about a quote, Benji? Is there a particular quote that you have?
Yeah, I don't know about necessarily quote. I do have a tattoo on my arm of kind of phrases. I was thinking about which one of these is the most interesting. So the one I first tattooed on my arm was JFDI, which stands for just fucking do it. That was one of the first ever phrases I learned in the tech world. And at the time I learned it, it's now been really horribly misused, and some people really hate it because they think it means like it's a way of getting someone to do something, a bit like saying agile it or something. But actually what it meant originally, and what I took from it, was really when you're feeling awkward and you're feeling like you don't want to speak up and the room may be awkward or whatever else, like what's the worst that can happen? Like Dr. Pepper, basically, like just fucking do it. Just like speak up, raise your hand, say that thing. Just because in the end of the day, you'll feel better for it. It's like roller coasters, right? Everyone stands in the queue feeling, I'm not going to do this. No, I feel great, right? It's like exhilaration after the thing. Run a marathon, whatever those things are you want to do, don't talk about it. Like just fucking do it. And like only you're holding yourself back, basically. So that was the one that I first tattooed. And I've got two other ones actually I might just mention, which I think are interesting, which I put on myself recently, which I had like 2019 was a pretty tough year, actually. Like Modest started really well, and then towards the end wasn't quite as fun, and the company changed a lot, and I wasn't really enjoying it that much. There's two phrases that really kept me going. One was a phrase which I learned from swimming in a pool in New York, a YMCA, and there was a lot of elderly pensioners there. And I once got out of the pool looking disappointed, and this elderly pensioner to me, I was 85 years old, and he goes, "Hey kid, what's up? What's with the long face?" And I was like, "Oh, I meant to do 25 lengths. I only managed 20 lengths." And he just looked at me like I was an idiot. He was like, "What?" He's like, "Every length's a victory, kid." And I was like, "Oh, okay, that's a really good way of looking at life. Like, don't always think about things you didn't achieve, think about you did achieve." And I always feel like cheesy phrases really get to me, and they really do actually like transform how I view a lot of things. And I think about the great things you did do, not the things you didn't quite make happening. And then the other one, which maybe isn't great for a podcast, just says "fuck it," which someone in a pub said to me last year when I was having a tough time. I was like really down on an issue. They were like, "Dude, fuck it. Like, it's just, it isn't that big a deal. Like, you're going to be okay. Like, you're fine. Like, think about in a year and a half time or longer or shorter than that, you'll look back and laugh on this. Like, no matter how big a thing you think it is right now, if you're not dying, it's almost certainly not that big a deal."
Mm-hmm.
And you can get a bit caught up in yourself. I certainly can. You get a bit self-obsessed in your own little world, and you forget that actually in the big world scheme of things, it's nothing. It's who gives a fuck.
So if we get back together and chat in 3 or 4 years' time, I imagine you'll have a whole sleeve of other philosophical musings up your arm.
Yeah, well, I mean, you can't see on the camera, but the whole thing's in a Kanban board.
That's amazing.
And the Kanban board, I thought, it's an original tattoo. I thought, oh, this is stupid. I put a Kanban board in their arm. And the done column is like life events, and that scrolls around my arm. So I add to it each year. So you'll certainly have more on there, yeah.
So the key to getting into product is to tattoo a Kanban board to your arm with philosophical musings.
No, I definitely wouldn't do that. But I think a love of Kanban will definitely help.
Excellent.
I think my phrase could easily be like, Kanban solve a lot of problems. After you, sorry, Duncan.
The last question that I have is about interview questions. Given that the podcast is all about personal growth and employability, I always like to ask my guests what their favorite interview question is, and then secondly, how they would answer it themselves.
Yeah, that makes sense. I might cheat and do two, because I'm not necessarily going to answer them both that well, because I still use them as well. But one of them is Like, when did you last fuck up? I've asked that at quite a few jobs. And we've been so conditioned in life not to talk about failure. We're so conditioned to try and spin negatives into positives, when occasionally it was just shit. Like, you got it wrong and you fucked up. And when people ask you that question in interviews, they're just looking to try and work out if you're a normal human.
Mm-hmm.
And majority of people can't answer that question. They really can't. So that's one that I think is really, really important. Also just very hard to fake, because you can feel someone's emotion in those situations because it probably hurt them. Like, they probably are a bit scarred by it. And we've all got a bunch of scars. And we're trying to pick out interviews where you can talk about those. And then the other one I talk about is what happens when somebody comes to, this is actually a question they ask at Spotify in the coaching interview. What happens if somebody comes to you saying that someone else they work with isn't up to scratch? Right? What do you do in that scenario if you are a leader, whether you are their manager or their coach or whatever else? And what sadly most people believe in a leadership position is that say, oh, fantastic, I've got the thing to do now. I can't wait to go and solve a problem for you. I'm going to take a problem away. I'm going to go and solve it. Right? And that's the opposite of what the good solution is. The good solution is, and actually someone we're hiring, an engineering manager, answered this perfectly the other day, said, well, I'd ask them if they told that person. Right? And it sounds so simple, and most people simply don't do that. They think that's not what their job is, but it is. And if that person says, oh, I don't feel uncomfortable telling them, still, your job is to help them to speak to that person. And if you aren't able to coach them into speaking to that person, whatever happens, don't do it on their behalf, because now you're involved in the problem and you'll be forever. So learn to role play with them, learn to do a script, like walk through different techniques they could use. There's all kinds you can do to help that person go and speak to them. But that is what really great leadership is. That's what coaching really comes down to. So I try and weave that question into all my different interviews for different roles.
That's really interesting. And also, I guess it ties back to business being a communication issue, and what you're doing there is you're improving the way that that person will then go and speak to their colleague.
100%, and it's endemic if you don't do it. That's what makes the right word. Like it's contagious. If everyone does it right, the whole company suddenly works so much better. If everyone does it wrong, all you get as a leader is this person is happy with this person, this person happy with this person. So all these problems that people need to work out for themselves. Everyone's an adult. That's all part of the job. And it really is, it spreads like wildfire if you can get it right.
Yeah. And I guess, the opposite is, culture kind of corrodes if you get it wrong. Great. So that's everything from me. We do have a couple of questions from our community. A lady called Akansha Kare says, you seem to have a very diverse experience across industries. What are some of the differences and similarities in product management across industries?
I mean, people talk about regulation quite a lot. So healthcare related, was Monzo in finance, Spotify less so. So that often changes how much work you have to do around releasing things and how much you have to do around risk analysis in terms of like formal writing things down and submitting things. But to be honest, the biggest differences for me in product management most come around the size of the organization. So AccuRx is quite small. So, for example, we right now are moving more into a phase where we do a lot more A/B testing. But up to this point, that isn't something you really do that much of early on, because you've got a load of users screaming for a thing. You just build the thing and you give it to the users. They say, this is one fantastic. Now build this thing for me. So once you start to build more complex products where they aren't necessarily sure what they need, and therefore like you ought to sort of see past that initial question and research, you need to really bring in A/B testing. Otherwise, you simply don't know if the feature you're adding to a product makes it better or worse overall. So that's kind of a small to big company thing. The other thing is probably what a lot of a product manager is in different orgs, which some is part is size, some industry, around the team management, I would say. So some places, Facebook, for example, you're not really involved in making sure your team is happy and healthy. You're just involved in setting the vision, doing OKRs, and really making sure the metrics are the right ones and to align with the other business metrics. Whereas AccuRx and a lot of other companies, you're also very involved in the running of the team. Doesn't mean you have to like personally do all the administrative tasks, but you are held accountable for them occurring. So that's a really interesting question to ask when you apply to a company. Like, what does product management mean here? Like, am I held accountable for the health of the team, the delivery of the team, the outcomes of the team? AccuRx is all three of those things, but some places it won't be. some places will pair you with a delivery manager, for example, who handles half that role.
Got it. And the next question comes from someone called Naomi Bennett, and she says, you have held roles at a number of high-profile employers. What do you think has put you over the edge in such competitive hiring scenarios?
Probably mostly luck. I mean, most of hiring is luck. Most of life is luck. Like when you interview somebody, you're seeing less than 1% of them, right? You're getting a little tiny sliver. And that's if the best interview process around. And they're not. All of them are horribly flawed. I designed our one, a lot of it, and it's horribly flawed. But like you're trying your best, basically. Like you do CV screenings, you try and pair, you try and make sure you have mixed diversity in your panels. So you're looking for biases and all the great things you can do. But even then, you're getting a little tiny sliver of someone. Unless you actually work with them full time, you haven't got a clue, which is why everyone does referrals, right? Referrals are like, I've worked with this person, they are great. And everyone loves referrals. However, referrals only work if you've got a really diverse organization to start off with. Otherwise, you refer people who look like yourself, which is generally how humanity works. And so there's a lot of luck involved. So don't take rejection too hard. Have a thick skin, because a lot of the time you might scan a CV, you give it 5-10 minutes, and you go, no. And actually, that person probably amazing. You have no idea if they're any good or not, right? You're just having the best guess you can. When you do apply for places, if you're going to write a covering letter, which I recommend you do not make it generic. Generic cover letters are pretty much like a fail instantly. Like, and I don't mean like find out who the person's name is at the top. I mean, work out what the company does. If it's a mission-driven company, the majority of tech companies probably were applying for mission-driven. What is their mission? Like, do you believe in their mission? If you do, talk about that. Like, say why you believe in that mission, and then say like some of the things how it relates to you. Don't repeat your CV. That we've already got the CV. And the CV needs to most talk about your most recent experience and what you actually do day to day. I get a lot of CVs that people are obsessed with having a one-page CV, and so they don't put anything on the one page, and so I can't possibly put you through. No cover letter as well. So don't be obsessed with one page. Like, talk about the things you are doing day to day. Don't use acronyms. Don't talk about, go to market as an acronym. You can put MVP if you want, but even then, like, try and avoid, like, can your mum read it and understand it? I also don't really care whether you had 20% year-on-year growth. That means nothing to me. Right? Like, yeah, that might be big, might be small. I don't work at your company. I have no idea. Like, talk about the things you're going to do, and also check if they align to what the company talks about. So for AccuRx, for example, we care loads about people. So make sure your CV talks about people. That's a really important part of the job. So there's a lot of luck, and then covering letters, make them good, and CVs don't be obsessed with one page.
That's really interesting, because one of the things that we teach in our online courses, the need to actually really deep dive into, what a company does, and even better, to actually have an opinion on what the company can do better. And I think that's always a really, really good step forward. Well, thanks so much, Benji. It's been a real pleasure to catch up, and I'm sure so many people are going to find this podcast really, really useful. So thanks.
No worries at all. I hope it's helpful for someone.
Cool. Cheers, Benji.
Thanks, mate.
Bye.